Hello and welcome to Gadget Joe, and in today's video we're taking a look at a little device that is absolutely tiny but offers some blisteringly fast speeds. In today's video we're taking a look at a product by Apacer. Now Apacer are a new brand to the channel. They are also a brand that are synonymous with some real high-end quality memory and storage solutions. Now they do a lot of storage solutions such as NVMe drives and SSDs. They also do memory in terms of DDR4, DDR5, RAM memory, which we actually have behind us right now, some more of their RAM, which is going to be coming out in the following days to this video. And what we have here is something very special. This is the very first Gen 5 NVMe drive that I've had on the channel, that I've had my hands on in general altogether. And it is a absolute powerhouse of a unit. Now obviously it is a tiny little unit because it's an NVMe drive. We're going to do the usual Gadget Joe style unboxing for this video. We're going to take a look at the box itself, get it out and see what you get inside the box. Then we're going to do a little bit of a talk about the specifications of the drive, and then after that we're going to do the usual, put it to the test on the test bench and see just how well it performs. There's some really bold claims for the performance of this drive, which I'll touch upon very shortly, so it'll be very interesting to see just how well it performs compared to those claims. Now the drive we have with us today is the AS2280F4. It is a 2TB model, and it is, as I mentioned, a Gen 5 NVMe drive. It's a very fast, high-performing NVMe drive as well, because it does claim up to 12,000 megabytes read speed and 11,800 megabytes of write speed, which is just mind-blowing. The advancements in storage technology is absolutely mind-numbing. The speeds that are capable nowadays are absolutely fantastic. Now there's a lot of things to note before you go out and buy a drive like this. You're going to need to make sure that you have multiple different things. First one is a motherboard that supports PCIe Gen 5. You'll often find that some of the motherboards that do support PCIe Gen 5 will have an issue where if you're going to use a Gen 5 drive, you actually lose some of the power to the PCIe for the graphics cards. So you're going to have to do a little bit of homework to work out which motherboard does fully support these drives. You're also going to have to make sure that your CPU, your processor, is actually compliant with a Gen 5 drive, because it's all well and good having a motherboard that can supply the power to one of these. You're going to need to make sure that you have a processor that is more than capable, or at least capable of powering a device like this. Now with that said, you are able to put this into a Gen 4 slot or a Gen 3 slot, but you're going to start to suffer in speeds. You're going to notice a significant drop compared to the claimed 12,000 and 11,800 megabytes read and write speed respectively. Now they do come in multiple models. They come in 1TB, 2TB, which is the one that we have here, and a 4TB. Now I've not been able to find any UK pricing currently, but they are available a lot in overseas, such as Newegg and places like that. And the ones that I've found are roughly for around the £250 price mark for the 1TB, and around the £395 to £450 price mark for the 2TB. I've not found any of the 4TB ones for sale currently, but I will leave some links in the description down below if I do find any that are UK based, or alternatively some of the better pricing options. So now that I've done some basic talking about the device itself and obviously the restraints that you're going to encounter when wanting to use a device like this, let's get to the unboxing. Now the box itself is very nice and bright. As you can see, it is a pretty black box, and then you have this nice green Apacer colouring around the outside with an image of the NVMe drive on the front. In fact, the actual NVMe drive on the front does feature the cooler, which this does come with included. On the back you have some basic information in multiple languages with some key information about the drives, and then on the sides there's not a great deal of information. It's just more a bit of branding, and obviously the 12,000, 11,800 megabytes speeds on the bottom here. When you open it up, it is a simple experience. You've just got a plastic housing with the drive and the cooler included. Open this up and you are able to take the drive itself out. And we're going to take a little bit more of a look at this very shortly, because first we're going to take a look at the cooler that's included. You do get a housing for the drive, and what this allows you to do is basically install the drive into here. As you can see, like this, and then it has the access for the drive bay at the end to plug it into your socket. This then allows the cooler to basically slide onto the top of this to enable full contact for that cooler. Now you do get some included thermal pads as well, which you're going to need to obviously secure and keep the heat transfer to its maximum potential. Now the cooler itself is an aluminium all body design. It's just a basic single one piece aluminium with some edging, as you can see here, and some nice intricate designs to allow the heat to dissipate away from the cooler. It does also feature a single fan. Now this is a single fan that is very much needed on a drive like this. When operating at those sort of speeds, these drives do kick out some serious heat. In fact, I've seen some Gen 5 drives without a cooler kicking upwards of around 90, potentially even 100 degrees Celsius. Now, whilst it will run at that temperature, you are going to seriously impact the performance of the drive. The drive will then start to thermal throttle, and it will automatically draw itself back with returns of performance to make sure that it stays nice and cool. So the operating temperature of this drive is rated between 0 and 70 degrees. So with this cooler, it should hopefully keep it nice and cool. Obviously, we're going to find that out very shortly when I do some testing. Now, it does have a little cable for you to plug the fan into a 4-pin PWM header. It would be nice to maybe see a different colour header on there. It's got a rather ugly white one on there, and it does sort of stand out. But once it's in your system and it's hidden underneath your graphics card and just tucked away, it should be fine, and obviously you can plug it into the bottom of your motherboard and hide it with the rest of your components. Now the cooler does look nice and modern as well. It is a big bulky thing, but once it's in position you won't really notice, and then all you see is the fan and the branding with a brushed stainless steel aluminium plate on the front here. It does look quite stylish. Now obviously you don't have to use the cooler that's included on this. If you do have your own cooler already, you can use it for this drive, but you're going to have to make sure that it's a decent cooler to ensure the best optimal performance for this drive. Right, so now that we've looked at the cooler, let's take a look at the drive itself. It is a 2280. That means it's 22mm wide and 80mm long. Most motherboards will have a standard adaptation or compatibility for a 2280 drive. Some of them will allow for longer ones, and some of them will be limited to a much shorter drive. So again, make sure you have a motherboard that has full support for a 2280 drive. Now it is a double walled design. What that means is it does have the controllers on both sides, which is why the cooler is also super essential for making maximum contact to those controllers and chips to ensure maximum performance in terms of cooling. It is powered by a very, very trusted and reliable Phison E26 controller, a very quality chip that is very good and very well performing, and it does also feature some SK Hynix ICs. The actual memory chips as well are very high quality, and it does feature some built-in data security and error correction features straight out of the box, and it also features SLC or single level cell caching for longevity and quality. It also features built-in wear leveling. It does feature a 5-year global warranty as well, so it should be protected by Apacer, as long as you don't push it too far and purposely destroy the drive, or alternatively physically damage the drive. You should be good at getting this repaired if there are any issues arising. It does feature on the other side a label, which actually if you remove it, it does void the warranty, so just be careful to keep that on there. And it just basically has some key information about the drive itself and the capacity. It has a lot of high-end components in there, which you would come to expect of a device that is estimated to operate at speeds of up to 12,000 megabytes per second. Now, at 12,000 megabytes per second, this is going to run very warm, which is obviously where the cooler comes in. I would not recommend operating this without a cooler. Now, I know I've already said that, but it's very, very much a strong recommendation that you use a drive like this with a cooler, just to avoid any potential damage to your drive. So in a moment I'm going to put this in my test bench, and I'm going to run some benchmarks to see the full performance of the drive. I very much estimate that the 12,000 read and the 11,800 write is probably a best case sort of scoring. I'll be very impressed if it gets anywhere near those sort of numbers. If you can get anywhere near those sort of numbers, you're already absolutely wiping Gen 4 and Gen 3 especially out of the water with some incredible performance from a drive like this. So I'm very keen to see how it performs. So So what I'm going to do now is get it all set up into the test bench. Let's get some benchmarks run and we'll see just how well it performs, and I will see you in a few moments after the testing to give a bit of a conclusion on the drive. When it came to testing the AS2280F4, we ended up with some very impressive results. For the purpose of this testing, we used a Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Pro X Wi-Fi motherboard running an Intel i7-13700KF, 32GB Apacer Panther DDR5 RGB RAM and a Gigabyte RTX 4080 Super WindForce GPU. For the first test we ran Crystal Disk Mark, and as you can see the results were outstanding. The drive managed to hit a blistering 12374 read score and an equally impressive 11738 write time when testing with a 1GB file packet. To put that into perspective, the Apacer VP4300 Lite, which is a very high performance Gen 4 drive, hit just 7106 read and 6572 write. And the S690Q, which is a pretty run-of-the-mill inexpensive Gen 4 drive, got a measly 4796 read and 2884 write. For our final test, we ran Atto Disk Benchmark to try and break down the process of the drives and see a clearer image of the stability throughout. Once again, using a 1GB file size, we hit 10.95 GB per second write speed and 11.52 GB read. A little lower than the previous test, but still some incredible numbers. The Patriot hit a maximum of 5.99 write and 6.63 read, whilst the S690Q hit just 2.71 write and 4.48 read score. An interesting thing to note here is the patterns of test results. The Apacer drive remained consistently strong and stable throughout the test, hitting maximum performance quickly and maintaining that high performance throughout. Looking at the Patriot drive, we had some good solid numbers, but the results were very sporadic and unstable. The S690Q, whilst being drastically slower, actually had very good stability too. It is worth noting that throughout the testing I did hit 67 degrees Celsius from the drive, so the cooler is definitely a must when using this drive. So as you can see, the results were very impressive, and in fact it actually sort of knocked me back a little bit because I was quite humbled with just how well this thing performs. I very much thought that it would be a typical case of this is a drive that will claim that it can hit these figures, and then in reality it doesn't hit those figures, and it is more just a pipeline figure that they've sort of hit at one point and then they can state that they have those speeds. And I was pretty much wrong on this case because the Apacer AS2280F4, the 2TB model that I had, actually exceeded the numbers that were claimed on the packet. Now, to say that a drive can hit 12,000 megabytes per second of read speed and 11,800 megabytes of write speed is an absolutely phenomenal claim, and they hit it out of the park. Now, the write speed, naturally so, fell short of the read speed, but that's pretty normal on any drive because it's always going to take much more to write a file than it would be to read a file. And we pretty much hit where it was expected to be, 11,800. In fact, on the test it was 11,730 something on the test. So it's pretty much hit it on the nail as to where it should be. That's an impressive, it's just a mind-blowing sort of speed for a write speed. Now, when it comes to the read speeds, they claim 12,000 megabytes per second, and it hit 12,374. Now, 374 megabytes might sound a little bit of a give and take, and you think, oh, it's not really that much of a big deal, that much more than the 12,000. But considering that a lot of the old SSDs or even the old hard drives would struggle to hit around 370 odd megabytes per second in read or write speed in general, that is a phenomenal result. So again, I'm massively impressed with this drive. Now, what is also very evident to see is it is a very stable drive. Throughout the testing that we did, we could see that the testing was persistently consistent and also very stable in every operation. It hit the maximum results, maximum numbers very quickly, and it maintained that high performance figures throughout. Now, I will really stress that the cooler is definitely something that is needed for this drive. I did attempt to run this drive without a cooler. Now, unfortunately, halfway through testing, I had to switch the system off because it was hitting temperatures of 92 degrees, which is just bonkers. It's absolutely crazy. It should not be hitting that sort of temperature. Now, that's no fault of the drive itself or of the motherboard or anything like that. That's just down to the fact that to be able to hit those sort of performance figures, it's going to be pulling a lot of power through that drive from the motherboard. And obviously, power in terms of computing or any form of technology means heat. And there was an abundance of it. The heat was absolutely emanating from it, to the point that when I turned the system off, I managed to put my hand into the system near the drive, and you could physically feel the heat coming from it. Now, considering the fact that water boils at 100 degrees, that gives you a bit of an indication of just how hot it got. I will state that it actually carried on performing at that high temperature, but I didn't really want to keep pushing it because I didn't want to cause any failures on the drive, and I felt that it was a completely unfair test because this is a drive that does come included with a cooler in the package, and I strongly recommend that you use the cooler that's in the package. Now, you can obviously use a cooler that you already have. A lot of motherboards have heat spreaders already on them that cover the M2 drives, and whilst they will work, they will cool the drive to an extent, they will never perform quite as well as the dedicated cooler or a cooler that has a fan or even a liquid cooling option. So strongly recommend for a drive like this to use the cooler that's included. Now, what's my take home from this? The drive is absolutely fantastic. A very, very solid performer. Very, very impressive. Yes, it's an expensive drive, but again, the numbers speak volumes. Everything that Apacer claims for this drive is exactly accurate, and that is absolutely fantastic. It's also very exciting to see drives like this come out into the market to the average consumer like you and me, because this really does give an indication of just how far the technology in terms of storage and data transfer has come, and it gives you a good indication of what's to come in the very near future. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, make sure that you have the correct motherboard for this, because a lot of motherboards will sacrifice the PCIe lane for the Gen 5 NVMe technology. So if you do use the NVMe Gen 5 socket on some motherboards, what will happen is the PCIe 1 lane will then be automatically dropped down to a PCIe 8 lane instead of a PCIe 16. So you're going to sacrifice some power there. Also, on some boards, if you do then use the NVMe Gen 5 socket, it will also disable the second PCIe slot. So you have to look into what motherboards you are going to be using. Now, this isn't the same for all motherboards. There's a lot of motherboards on the market, especially now because the technology is there, so they're having to bring out new technology to compete and obviously to comply with the technology that's available in those drives. A lot of motherboards will be able to keep up just fine and also be able to maintain the full bandwidth and everything they need for the PCIe lanes as well. So it is a big jump in terms of going to Gen 5. It is a massive change in the industry, and it's definitely something I think is very, very welcome. Now, I do have another couple of Gen 5 drives coming, so I'll be able to put them together and really get an idea of how they perform compared to this. Now, obviously, this is the first Gen 5 drive that I've had in my hands and had a chance to test, and it is definitely by a country mile an absolute game changer in terms of performance. The performance blew everything else out of the water. Now, the Patriot Viper VP4300 Lite that I tested this drive against does have a noticeably different performance in terms of the overall scores. Now, that is not anything to do with the Patriot's quality. The Patriot drive is a very solid performing Gen 4 drive. So this is just a good indicator of the massive performance jump from Gen 4 to Gen 5. And it's definitely something very exciting to see. And that's pretty much my video of the Apacer AS2280F4 2TB drive. What's my overall thoughts on this? It's an absolutely solid piece of kit with some absolutely mind-blowing performance to boot. Now, again, it is an expensive drive, and you're going to have to take into consideration all the extra features, all the extra accommodations that you're going to have to put into place, such as the correct motherboard, the correct processor, and obviously in terms of heat and cooling. So if you have a board that is compatible and you are looking for a really fast storage drive, whether it be for probably not so much gaming. It's not really needed for gaming. Obviously, I know a lot don't start coming running at me. Yes, I know you do need it for gaming, but primarily this is going to be more at a wake-based system. Obviously, you can do a lot of rendering and stuff like that where you need a lot of access to data really quickly. This is definitely something that you should be looking for. So if you're in the market for one, I will leave a link in the description down below. I'll try and find a UK-based price one, but for now, it looks like you're going to have to order overseas and wait for it to be sent over. But as soon as one comes available in the UK, I will update the link down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to click like and subscribe to the channel because we have lots coming. We have obviously the extra Gen 5 reviews coming from the other drives, and we obviously have a lot more components like the ones that you see behind me and some giveaways as well. So that's pretty much it from me. I've been Gadget Joe. This has been the Apacer AS2280F4, and it gets a massive double thumbs up from me. And until next time, goodbye.